I heard a quote once, for example, people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And if the belly to belly interaction with your customer is a technician, I wouldn't say like always be selling, like upselling necessarily, because sometimes people know what a service company is trying to do. And like, I just want you to come out here and do the work. I'm not here to get upsold. But selling your value, that can come from a lot of different ways.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the ServiceMonster podcast. Joe is out of the office once again this week, so Javi is stepping in. Mm-hmm. He and I are going to kind of take over the first little bit, and then we're also going to have Michael join us for the kind of feature focus later on. So Javi, Michael, and myself have like a little party there at the end and kind of explain some things.
Party?
About the sales, well, I mean, as much of a party as it can be with you there.
Oh, so. Man, dude, it's always it's a party with three, man. So, right?
Well, I think actually, you know what? I take that back. It'll probably be the life of the party, this fly new haircut you got.
Oh, man. I'm just trying to be like you, dude.
Even kind of growing some stuff there.
That's right.
Yeah. Finally holding up to the New Year's resolution.
Yeah. I got it. I got one hair on my chest finally.
Nice. Only took 6 months, but he got it.
I got it.
So, Javi, what have we got today to start?
Yeah, so as I mentioned last week, we will have a new release by the time that this podcast is released, which is early in the week, next week. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and we do have some notes on what those releases and bugs and things of that nature will be. Do you want to go through a couple of those? Yeah,
so the full release notes, talking is hard, will be on the blog, but just a few kind of to mention are a few of our users had an issue in their quick add. It was relatively kind of focused on just a few of our newer users. Mm-hmm. They're unable to schedule jobs in the quick add, so that's been resolved. Another big one for our hybrid 5 and 6 users, those who kind of bounce back and forth between the software. Canceling jobs in 5, the job notifications, and we talked about this on one of our earlier podcasts, the job notifications weren't being disabled in 6. Right. They weren't communicating that process. And so that has been resolved. So any of our hybrid users, that's definitely a big one that I think they'll be thankful that that's working that way. And then these last two will be huge for a lot of users. So if you're listening, definitely tune into this part. There were 2 issues on our grid list. So one of them has been kind of an ongoing thing that we've heard from a lot of our users on, and one of them is more recent. And so I'll start with that one. You were unable to resize the columns. So on our account list, order list, job list, when you try to resize the columns, there would be like some pushback there. And it wouldn't hold that when you would move from page to page. So that has been resolved. Whatever width you set those columns at, it'll actually remember that. It'll save that next time you log in. It'll remember that. It's all tied to you as a user. Yeah, it's just like kind of think of it as like an over glorified Excel sheet. Right. And it'll actually stay sticky this time. Yep. And the really big part, which has been requested a lot throughout my time here and even before, on any of those grid lists, you have the ability to choose different columns. So it's kind of like a preset list of anywhere from 6 to 8 columns that are on there. Yeah. But we have a whole slew of data that can be included if you need to see it for your particular use. Well, now whatever you choose in that columns list, it'll actually stay permanently when you log in or log out. Because right now it stays permanently until you log out, and then the system refreshes to what the defaults were to kind of improve like the query times and other things like that. Yeah. But they've done a ton of work on it. The devs have done a great job. And so now when you choose those columns, whatever your custom viewpoint is going to be, it'll save that. And so the next time you join into that order list, account list, et cetera, it'll remember that. This is really big because different companies, even if they're in the exact same industry, want to see different things first on the list, like an account memo or whatever. So this will change the game for a lot of people if you know how to use it. And if you don't, ServiceMonster.net/onboarding. Yeah. We'll include a quick little video when this comes out.
You don't want them to call you? Well, I'll give you Adam's personal phone number right now, and
start calling after hours.
Yeah, 3 a.m. This is Jake from State Farm.
But as I mentioned, those are just kind of 4 of the larger ones to take note. The full release notes will be on the blog, so go ahead and take a look at that.
Yeah. Now, moving on to SMUG. We had some good stuff this week. Dan asked about creating a whole new order group called the Rework, and thought this might be a good time to kind of go through some of the best practices for in the system, and like, because we don't want it to affect the order averages and things of that nature when something does need to be reworked.
Yeah. So Dan was listening to one of our other podcasts where we kind of talked about this and the different job types you could use. And so when you do have a scenario where rework is involved, you want to make sure that that's tracked properly so that it's not, affecting, you don't think that job is revenue building. And so you can make sure that your technicians are trained properly if there's one that seems to be having more rework than others, right?
Okay.
And what Dan brought up was that he thought it might work best if there's a whole new order type that was just called rework.
Right.
And so what I kind of wanted to do is just kind of show what Joe talked about and why the system is built this way. Because the idea is that you would just take the invoice that you recently completed.
Right.
And you would just schedule another job against it and label it as rework. That way they know what they did last time. They have all the information there. And then you can include fresh new job notes for that particular job of what needs to be reworked, what the issue was, make sure that the customer is satisfied and all those notes. But it's not going to create a new order because if you create a new order, your dashboard's going to be off slightly.
Yeah.
It's gonna like lower your average because your new order is there's no actual revenue there.
And you may not even notice it if you have a lot of invoices. It may not bring down that average. But it will make a difference if, the beginning of the month or whatever, like you'll notice it right away. So right now the order types are estimate, work order, invoice, and voided, if you didn't know. And so he was asking for a whole new one, right? Like rework.
And so, they really just wanted to kind of explain like why the reasoning is the way that it is. And then also one of the other users in SMUG kind of chimed in and her thought was, exactly what I just mentioned. Like, well, we just create a whole new order and then we just kind of invoice it out at $0. And that's just kind of, if you do that, is it going to be the end of the world?
Probably not.
No, but it will lower your average invoice and it's going to just kind of take some of those KPIs and affect them, and, the whole point is we want to have the data as clean and is an honest representation of what's happening as possible.
Exactly.
And plus, you want to make sure your technicians know exactly what happened last time. If it's a different tech, they would want to see everything that guy did on the previous order.
Or pictures and
or exactly.
Notes. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Good answer, man.
Is this Family Feud? Good answer.
Good answer. Yeah.
Yeah, good answer.
And the board says...
Top 5 answers on the board.
Right. Scott was asking, can you, here's like a tongue twister, can you give one ticket or invoice to appointments with a separate technician from the mobile app, so I can set a quote for myself and the job time for each tech? Thought it would be good training, to our listeners, having that ability to schedule multiple jobs on any order from the app specifically.
Yeah. So this is just kind of one of those quick kind of feature training notes is that in our system, orders and jobs are separated. And for a lot of you, that it isn't always clear if your process is generally one job per order. They seem like they're just all kind of connected. But every order, you can have multiple jobs. You can assign it to multiple routes on your schedule, so you can have multiple technicians working in it.
Right.
And on the desktop app, on the QuickAd, you can schedule as many jobs against an order as you want right there all on one screen.
Super simple. It's easy. Yep. You have a lot of real estate on the screen to play with.
Yep. And even if you don't use the quick add, you can still schedule as many jobs against that. You can do one-off jobs that, again, like the rework scenario. Or in this scenario, you can have one job for the estimate first, and then a week later, you have the other job for the actual work to get done. So just kind of one of those things that's nice to point out, whether you're using it for the mobile app or just wanting to have those blocked off on your schedule, making sure that you have all of your bases covered.
Right. Makes sense. And Tim asked, I don't have a process in place for tracking my employees' time on a job. Does anyone have a good system down? Maybe use a ServiceMonster or another program. Looking for ideas.
Yeah, so I always like to point out kind of these collaboration posts. It's one of my favorite things to see in SMUG is when the various business owners are kind of asking each other for, tips that they might have on their own. And in this particular one, it got brought up, a couple of different companies. Life 360 was one that got mentioned, where that one's a little bit more in depth about kind of keeping track of GPS at all times on their company phones. The reason we can't have that set up on is because it's a personal phone. Generally, the apps can be downloaded on, so it creates issues as far as what's allowed. As far as like the tracking goes. But there is that possibility, and then you have the ability to check in and check out on the technician app. One of the worries of there is if they forget or things like that. If they do forget and they're honest, you can go in and edit that manually if you're an admin or a manager user on the schedule. So you if that does come up, you do have that ability. But you want to make sure you train kind of the SOP process, because I'm sure you guys have SOPs, right? But the SOP process can just be like when you're on the job, you check in, and it's really hard to not check out. It's part of that ending checklist. If you just go through the list at the end of it, like you're checking out every time.
Yeah, you can't miss it if you're doing it right. Yep.
So yeah, thanks as always to our SMUG users for their collaboration with each other. For this week's feature focus, I'm going to let Michael and Javi talk first kind of about the relationship in terms of sales and marketing and how they kind of work together. So I'm going to pop out here, and Michael is going to take my spot.
Welcome, Michael.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, thanks for being on here.
Yeah.
And this is interesting because, marketing and sales, it doesn't work. It's kind of like a neck and a head kind of deal. Yeah. And what I love about, right? It's like, look over there. And it's funny because we actually work really close to one another physically, and it's really easy to kind of collaborate and that communication. But you wanted to talk about a couple things. Do you have anything that you as far as like, because of course some of the sales and marketing processes that we have at ServiceMonster won't necessarily be super specific to like a service industry business, but it's almost like the same thing if you tear it down to the bare bones.
I think like the fundamentals
are
the same, kind of the general focus behind how you approach sales and marketing is the same across the board pretty much. I mean, I just wanted to kind of briefly just give an overview of the relationship between sales and marketing. Basically, they need each other. Sales and marketing need each other. They don't really work that well individually. Marketing kind of gets the general focus of marketing, is to get that brand awareness out there or to get people to know what your brand is. And for a service business, it's involves advertising your services, involves advertising a special offer you're running or a deal. That's kind of like the initial contact. The marketing is the initial contact, initially reaching out, getting people to be interested in your service or in your business. And then the sales team are the ones who actually make it happen, who convert those leads into sales, into actual customers.
Right.
I think the way you do it is like, marketing gets that initial contact and exposure. Yep. Sales reels them in. That's the simplest way to put it.
You bag them, I tag them, man. Yep. That's what I heard.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because even after the sale, and I think Adam can chime in here in the future. Like, well, not right now. He's spacing out right now. But it's when somebody buys our software, that's where it's like just begun.
Yeah.
Because I can show them all the shiny things that are important to them.
Yeah.
And that because people buy based off of emotion, right? We all know that. We all are human beings. We do things to either avoid pain or gain pleasure. And you're seeing all these shiny things in this new software, looking ahead like, wow, if I just do what Javi said in this live demo and I implement this, my business is going to be drastically different in a year. And then they start chipping away at it after that sales call, and they're like super frustrated, and they take their anger out on, or not their anger out, I should say, frustration. Yeah, because it's hard, guys, to learn new software. On our onboarders, they work through it with the onboarders, and I feel like the onboarders are true salespeople at ServiceMonster, specifically because they're consistently selling value, showing new shiny things, if you will, to the customer. But they have to work through those nuts and bolts that most people just kind of, you gotta become competent at in those things.
Yeah, I mean, it's going back to, like, I guess the relationship of obviously, of like Michael you were saying, Javi. Of Michael and Javi, yes, sales and marketing at ServiceMonster.
That's right.
We don't need to go too much into what I mean. Actually, in I don't remember what episode it was a while back on one of the podcasts I was on, and Joe and I talked about marketing strategies, kind of an overview. I think we will be doing more of that in the future. So, kind of, we want to hammer home the importance of really focusing individually on sales and marketing, but also focusing on them together. Each aspect needs its own attention, but you also have to look at the big picture of what you're trying to do with them. I mean, really the whole point is to get jobs, obviously. That's the point, or to get paid.
Exactly.
To make money. But for a service business, I mean, you guys are busy. You guys are out there. A lot of you are single owner operators. You don't have a ton of time to spend on marketing or on sales, for that matter. I mean,
we're wearing all the hats.
Yeah, you're wearing all the hats. I mean, you're the marketer, you're the sales guy, you're the office person, you're the technician who does the jobs. You're and the owner. You're everything.
Right. It's like you show up at somebody's house and like, can I speak to your customer service? And you're looking at them.
Yep. Exactly. So I just wanted to kind of. We talk about this a lot, but just the importance of automating as much marketing as possible of, whatever ad source that you're using, whether it's Google ads or Facebook or Instagram or something, doing those kind of ads where you can set them and run, and then have them go to a lead capture source that is also automated or streamlined. That's what,
like what?
I think the most like web forms, like for ServiceMonster, we have web forms that you can use, or Zapier you can use for automating lead capture. You just want to make it as easy as you can on yourself. And I think that's kind of a lot of our goal with ServiceMonster and the marketing tools that we provide really is to streamline that process between sales and marketing for service businesses. Yeah, of making it so that the automated marketing for all the follow-up stuff is pretty straightforward, pretty easy. Set it, let it run, and getting your leads in from the initial advertising that you do on your own, getting those leads to come into ServiceMonster so that you can easily follow up on them. That's our goal. We want to make that as easy because you guys don't have time to be doing a lot of other stuff. I mean, you can do organic engagement like Joe and I talked about on Instagram, of reaching out to people and actively trying to get new leads that way. But again, and I see a lot of guys who do that, who are single owner operators, but they're doing that in their spare time. They're doing that in between jobs or in the evenings or something. And it works, but you got to automate as much as you can.
It's consistency, guys. When you're doing things like one-on-one engagement with people, especially like on Instagram or social media, it's consistency. It doesn't matter if you're like the best engager on social media. If you're only doing it once a week, it's probably not going to be very effective. Yeah. But yeah, it works. What's that saying? Like, some things work all the time, but nothing works all the time or something like that. But just, stick to that one system that you have. If you have systems, it'll work.
Yeah. And I think this is the last like kind of point of relationship between sales and marketing that I wanted to touch on. And this actually relates to a recent blog post that I posted. By the time this is out, it'll be last week. Joe actually asked on Facebook to his friends and followers on Facebook, what are the five, or what is the best business decision you've ever made, and what is the worst business decision you've ever made?
Great questions.
Yeah, and he got tons of responses. I think about 200 responses between the two different posts. I did a blog post summing up the 5 from each that were kind of the main ones. A lot of them were repeated. People kind of had the same best and worst decisions they'd made. And one that I just felt like really, really related to our discussion of sales and marketing, kind of the overview of how they relate, is answering your phone, always answering your phone. A lot of guys said the best business decision they ever made was doing something to or implementing a system to where their phone was always answered. One guy, his wife came on board and did all the office stuff, answered the phone. Someone else said that they hired an answering service to always answer their calls, because basically if you're doing marketing and you're advertising for your business, but you don't answer the phone when someone's calling you that saw your ad, and then you lose that doesn't even become a lead at that point. You just lose it and you don't get that business. I mean, you're wasting money at that point.
Exactly.
And that's kind of the whole focus there of making sure that what you're doing with marketing is translating to your sales in general by answering your phone.
Exactly.
And making sure that it's all coming together.
100%. It's like dating, right? Could be the best looking guy and not talk to anybody or leave your house.
Yep.
And never get a date.
Yep.
But you can, be the worst looking guy, but you just go through the numbers like, hey, you into tall dudes with brown hair and glasses? Nope. Okay, next, right? And you can eventually collect enough numbers, but if you don't call them back or don't text them until like 3 days later, we might lose interest and find somebody else. Yeah. We're talking about carpets, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You just got to be on top of it. Answer your phone, be on top of it. Otherwise, your whole sales and marketing process is gonna collapse.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not effective at that point.
For sure.
Looks like you have a bunch of stuff that you wanted to go over more sales perspective.
And most of these things too, like we've already kind of covered. But I do want to mention that like qualifying your leads is crucial, and knowing like which avenues have better leads than others, right? Because I know a lot of you guys use like Angie's List or Home Advisor. I don't know who bought out who, but for newer companies, right? It's sometimes it helps. It doesn't work for all companies, but those leads may not be the most qualified ones because they're price shoppers. Yeah. A lot of times, not always. But for us specifically, I know a few months ago we were doing more Facebook ads, and we kind of we turned that down, right?
We restructured it. Yeah, we turned it down a bit. Yeah, restructured it. Yeah,
that was because some of those leads coming in from Facebook, as we were calling them out, they thought we were a lead generation company, that we provided leads, or our message wasn't clear. Sometimes a lot of junk leads, and we just knew Facebook didn't deliver the quality leads that we needed, versus with some of the content that we push out, like this, or on our, that eventually makes them land on our website, like through Instagram or something like that. And they fill out when somebody's actually putting in their information, they've already have seen ServiceMonster, like, I don't know, 10, 12 times. Through multiple different avenues. And they're way more qualified because they physically had to type that stuff out. Again, for us, like, I feel like within the first 5 minutes of getting a lead, like 95% of the time, if we call them, 95% of the time they'll answer. And I think that can go hand in hand with the service business, because if you get a lead right away, if you have an alert, like an email or a notification, call them, because they're probably going to call 2 or 3 other companies as well right after yours.
Yeah, that's being efficient, effective, making the most out of your marketing to sales kind of process.
Right.
Being timely with it. Yeah.
For
Punctual.
sure. One other thing too that I wanted to mention is mind-blowing content. Putting out things that actually matter and seem more specific to that customer is pretty important.
Yeah. Exactly.
Sometimes, like, of course, we send out emails to everybody and they see this, everybody sees the same thing, but sometimes that's geared towards people who are already customers, but we're still continuing to deliver content and value because our product is forever changing and always getting better, and it's like the worst it'll ever be, always. Right. So but even better. Right, because it'll always get better. But even after I do get a lead from you, from all the stuff that you're working on the back end. I have my own follow-up emails that I do that are more specific. Some testimonials to carpet cleaners versus testimonials to a window washer, or repeat rate. I may not send a repeat rate specific email to a lead if their company is something like water restoration, right? Because you can do as much marketing as you want. You can't force somebody to have an accident, right?
Exactly.
Or a fire emergency or something.
They need your services for.
Exactly. But it's still good to get it out there, because when they do need it. But you get the point. Be specific on who you're targeting and what you're trying to convey to them, and bring in value. And to a carpet cleaner, it could be, hey, 6 months after a service, hey, these are 5 easy things that you can do to take wine off of your rug if you spill wine on it or something, before calling us. Right.
Exactly.
But things of that nature that make people feel like special.
Well, I think one thing that I just thought of with that is residential versus commercial work. So many service businesses do both. They do residential work, they do commercial work. Those are vastly different in how you market to those, how the sales process is entirely different. And that's a great example of what you were saying of really personalizing the marketing content, and also when you get to the sales the actual sales time, you need to be specific with that, because if you're all focusing on, cleaning your driveway and cleaning your fence and stuff, and then some business owner who has a business in like a big warehouse or something is going to be like, what? Like, that doesn't apply to me. It doesn't have that connection. I think it's a very easy, real example of why it's important to personalize your content and really to be intentional with it.
Exactly.
You don't want to, it's not bad necessarily to do some kind of just blanket general marketing. Because at least at
that point you're doing something.
Yeah, and that's more brand awareness. But when you're really focusing on trying to get someone to, do a contract, if it's a commercial work, or just come clean their house, you need to be specific. Tell them what you're offering, how it benefits them, why they should use you, and make it, extremely applicable to their life, to their situation, their neighborhood, even.
100%, man. Because when you are targeting commercial clients, when it's business to business, sometimes a business owner won't read it, and it'll be like a manager of a facility or something. Point, and they don't care about that business as much as the owner cares about that business. So is this email being sent out to the owner, or is it being sent out to the manager, property management,
or just like whatever. An office person, even.
An office person, exactly.
Just like an office assistant.
So switching around the verbiage so it brings value to them in that point of view, like, hey, let me make your job easier where you're at, or hey, let me make your curb appeal for your business, help you improve sales. Let me come wash your windows and remove those hard water spots so that, you know, how you do anything is how you do everything kind of thing. Versus, you know, obviously like residential, you might want to switch it up a little bit. Maybe a parent will be reading that and they're busy with kids all the time and don't have that flexibility in their schedule to do some of those cleaning things that like washing a window or cleaning their carpet or whatever. But that's a great point, bro.
Was there anything else that you wanted to go over for that? Should we bring Adam back on?
I think
talk about some processes in ServiceMonster.
Yeah, because we have a ton of things in ServiceMonster that they can use to keep track of some of the marketing things, like after an estimate is created, or following up. And these,
and Adam knows a lot more about that stuff than I do. So and he's like the master.
Exactly.
Like you know a lot too.
I just talk about the shiny things, man.
Yeah.
And then
Adam knows like how things are done and knows like the details.
Adam is the man.
He's amazing. Yeah. Honestly, if you guys don't know how amazing Adam is, now you know. Yeah. He's amazing. What a guy. What a guy. we love Adam around here. We do. Yeah. Yeah.
This is not a sponsored ad.
Nope. He didn't force us to say this or anything. What? No. Seriously though.
All right, Adam, you want to come on back?
All right. Well, thanks for having me. This was fun.
Michael, thank you. Appreciate your time, man.
Yeah, of course.
Hey, Adam.
Hey, Javi. Some hype I got to live up to now.
That's right, dude. I'm just trying to feed you some energy. Bring the heat, man. So we want to talk about some sales processes in ServiceMonster. What are some of the processes that are, because different industries have different sales processes. Obviously, like a window washer might be drastically different than like a water restoration company.
Right.
It's a quick job versus something that's going to take a long time or higher tickets or whatever. What does that look like for you? What do you try to gear people towards?
Well, I think at the beginning, kind of like taking that little pipeline from marketing to sales, if we're just looking at a new sale, the first thing you really just want to focus on is, like I mentioned, one of our very first podcasts, we're talking about the leads, and that's just the activities. Using the activities inside ServiceMonster so that you have the initial contact handled and you have notes about the initial contact handled. If you're an owner-operator, or if you have a really small team and maybe you guys are wearing a lot of different hats, then you're going to have a lot of different things going on during your day. And if you don't take the time, it only really takes about 10, 15, 20 seconds. If you don't take the time to put those notes in, the next time you contact that person, whether it's the next day, whether it's 2 days later, you're going to be asking the same questions. You're no longer prepping yourself. You're not getting ahead of what his problems are. You're just more focused on kind of really just, all right, so just tell me what day you want and I'll come do the work. You're not going above and beyond. You're not utilizing what CRM is for, right? To help build that relationship.
Right. That's what it stands for, customer relationship management.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's really the very first thing, is utilizing those activities, whether it's on the account list itself, whether you're using the lead list process. I don't care where you're doing the activities, because you can build them from almost any page. The whole point of it is that you can keep track of your notes.
Yeah.
So that's the first process. The next one would then be to automate some sort of follow-up after that. For obviously after the work's done, you can automate that whole process. But even just from the time that you've made your first contact, or you've been an on-site estimate, maybe do a follow-up email to that, so that you're not constantly being the only one sort of focused on making sure that they've read and reviewed the proposal and that they've gone through that, but that you also, have some automated help just for that time.
For sure. If
you really want to go above and beyond, and you don't really necessarily want to have additional office staff, you can also utilize something like Responsibid, because their whole process is really the sales pipeline and upselling and kind of taking that time away from yourself or from like additional employees you would have to hire to handle that.
Exactly.
So,
and I've heard a ton of value from Responsibid too. Like as far as that follow-up process after, or even especially after an estimate, is spot on.
Yeah.
So
honestly, at some point we'll probably have a full podcast on ResponsiBid, because if you guys haven't heard of them, if you are looking to kind of enhance your sales, they are a fantastic platform. They're in our marketplace. You can read about them there. Not really a sales pitch, I promise. If Kurt, if you listen to this, it's not really the point of this, but they have a great product. And so
what's interesting, man, because like I will get people calling in into ServiceMonster just because they integrate with, or we integrate with ResponsiBid.
Yeah.
And there's almost like a cult following around ResponsiBid. And I looked at their price tag and it's expensive, but I've never heard that it's not worth the investment. It's a ton of window washers use them for sure.
Yep.
And
I'd say the primary demographic is going to be the window washers and the pressure
washers. Yeah. Yep. Sweet, man. But as far as like our Kanban board and things of that nature, that's like a little bit more advanced, right?
Yeah, and it's not really that I don't start with that. It's more like because from my point of view, I'm trying to help someone understand the system first. The Kanban is then, if you want to have a visual representation of that data, that's where the Kanban comes into play. And it's probably my favorite place in the software.
Yeah, man. Because like, I think the biggest thing I'm a visual person. Yeah. I want to set myself up for success the next time I pick up a conversation with somebody.
Yeah.
And I mean, you haven't seen a friend for a while, and then like last time they told you something important in their life, and you ask them the same question, like, dude, I told you last time. Like, you feel like a jerk. It's kind of like forgetting somebody's name.
Yep.
Like, hey, guy, how are you? And that, like, you can leave in the Kanban board. You can visually see where you last left off with somebody, so you can pick it up right where you last left off. Whether if it's a quick note, an estimate, an email, a quick call, they're talking to their husband about the estimate, whatever it is, it's going to set yourself apart, because people aren't like, they're not dumb. They know, and they're talking to other companies as well. And the little things matter. The little things matter to them.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think too, to really come full circle with how you and Michael kind of started the conversation, that's really interesting, because in my relationship, as far as the business is concerned, is drastically different than any of our kind of service providers. You guys don't need to train someone outside of your technicians how to clean their own carpet, right? It's not really it's not really the process as far as my job title goes. But there is a big correlation in the fact that what you mentioned about, yes, the sales process has shown the shiny things. You've shown off kind of how maybe you have like some really good reviews. Maybe you have some awards, some sort of certifications you're showing off that set you apart from some of your competitors. That's great. Okay, so you've sold on that. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how you've sold them if when you or your technicians are actually on site don't, uphold to whatever that standard is. Yep. And that's kind of that relationship from you to me. Like after you make the sale, there's almost like a reselling process during the training. I have to go into all the nitty gritty and show someone how they can actually get the most out of ServiceMonster.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the same thing as the technician or the owner operator has to then take what they've sold the customer and really match that in the quality of work. Doesn't matter how good your sales and marketing is if your work is subpar.
Yeah, because that could all come tumbling down if everybody in your business doesn't have a mindset of you always have to be selling. Everybody is always selling. I don't care if you're trying to sell your kid on going to bed and, to go to bed. You're still trying to convince them to a new way of thinking or educate somebody, whatever you want to call it. And I mean, it's pretty crucial on I heard a quote once, for example, people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And if the belly to belly interaction with your customer is a technician, I wouldn't say like always be selling like upselling necessarily, because sometimes people know what a service company is trying to do, and like, I just want you to come out here and do the work. I'm not here to get upsold. But selling your value, that can come from a lot of different ways.
Right. It's not telling them, hey, your gutters are a mess, I can clean them right now for whatever.
We're only $99.
Right. It's actually it's okay, our initial proposal is for $400.
Right.
So we're doing that work. Also, when we were up on your roof, we noticed this. We don't have to do it now. We don't even have to do it in the future. You know, it's completely up to you. But if you don't take care of this, at some point it's going to lead to this, and this.
Yeah. Just setting yourself apart in that way, or like, hey, this was on your roof. Is this your kid's toy or something? Like little things like that versus just leaving it there, looking the other way, or feeling like you have to get paid to do something. Like it's the little things like, hey, Mr. Customer, like I went ahead and took care of this for you. It was just there, might as well. Just, you know, FYI kind of thing.
Right. And so some of that really might seem obvious, like, oh yeah, make sure that the work you do obviously is up to snuff. But yeah, like you said, it's really how you're making them feel. Like, are they comfortable with you in their house, with the technician in the house? Have you created an atmosphere, like a culture where your technicians care about that as much, you know, as others have? It's one of the greatest things about working with Jay up north there, is their whole company, like just being part of their meetings. I mean, that Michael can attest, he was there, like everyone was very involved in that. Everyone had a purpose. Everyone felt very valued, and they want to, you know, share that value with those.
Dude, it's crazy because I used to run into the janitors from Jay's company. Yep. They would come in and they were just so friendly. They would talk about, but at the same time, like if I was on a phone call, they wouldn't turn on the vacuum. Little things like that. Yeah. Like made all the difference, because they were aware of their surroundings. They had what Tony Robbins likes to call sensory acuity, to know what's happening around you, and just use common sense, right? But like common sense ain't so common these days. Right. But yeah, it's just kindness, selling your kindness at your company.
And that's how you're going to set yourself apart. It truly is. I mean, these are things that we could talk about for probably hours. You know, the topic's broad enough that you can really kind of go into that. But just to kind of come full circle, like just make sure that you have marketing efforts out there. If you don't have the time for it, automate it as much as you can. Yeah. Make sure that when the marketing actually works, you're going through the steps as fast as possible to be hitting those leads. Make sure they're qualified. You know, I really like price shoppers are huge, probably, I won't say issue, but there's definitely a huge kind of percentage of our culture users that really are based around price and nothing more. Yeah. And it's one of those like whatever you're paying for is what you're going to get, right? Yeah. And so you don't necessarily have to make changes to that. We'll have a podcast on pricing at some point.
Dude, it's interesting because sometimes you can add value to your company. You can add to your customer by upping your prices. Yep. Like straight up. Like you don't have to bend over backwards or anything of that nature. If you're just up to the eyeballs with work, sometimes the best you can do is raise your prices. Right. That's value. I mean, people don't go into Gucci and ask for a discount. Like, you're going to pay what it costs. If you want a discount, you go to, like, I don't know, Groupon and look at the companies that are on there or whatever.
So yeah, like I said, we can go pretty broad because the topic itself is fairly broad in that regard. But if you're using ServiceMonster, make sure you're noting those things in your activities. I know I've said it before. I'll hammer that nail until the day I die, probably. If you're not tracking that, then you're not going to be able to have the proper follow up. You're not going to be able to really know the nitty gritty of what, like I said, getting out in front of what the problem is. You're not listening to what the customer needs are, because you're not taking the time to really note that you care about it yourself. And
I agree.
if you're a visual person, use that Kanban board to kind of differentiate what step the process is in. Easy place to keep track of all your notes there. And then automate some of the follow-up. So,
all right.
So yeah, hope that was useful for everyone. We all had a great time. Next week, Joe will be back, and we'll have kind of a more standard podcast going on there. But until next time, hope everyone has a great week.